And all right, guys. So, Skylar, you said you were the affirmative, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. Well, in that case, the floor is all yours.
Excellent. I want to start by talking about, I do view this as a very serious subject. I do have some nuance to my beliefs. The pro-life position that I am going to be arguing for tonight does make exceptions for medically necessary abortions. So any content I cover tonight is not going to be covering medically necessary abortions, so I leave that out, which was agreed upon before the debate. So let me start with a quote from I think someone who has a lot of, well, this statement has a lot of value to me, and I think others will see the same value. It's from Fred Rogers, and it says, "Fame is a four-letter word, and like tape, our Zoom, our face, our pain, our life, our love, what ultimately matters is what we do with it." And how I'd like to focus this debate is on how we treat life and how we value life. We live in a world where many times throughout history, human life has had very little value. We can use examples of slavery, almost the complete history of how women were treated, children in the Industrial Revolution, working as slave labor in factories, eugenic programs would even be something. But these are all examples of what happens when we choose to devalue life and we choose to take another path that does not have us valuing it. So I've kind of prepared a little bit of a statement that will try to kind of address some of the things that are often used for why the pro-life position isn't tenable in reality. So I guess I'll just start with that. Let me start by saying that everyone who you have ever loved or has ever loved you or made a positive difference in your life is here because their mother chose life. We must not end life in order to feel safe. In life, your safety is not guaranteed nor promised. We cannot let our fear of what the future brings write our destiny. Your fear does not dictate your child's actual future. It only ends the chance of it having one. Life is hard and cruel, especially for women. We live in a world where oftentimes women are treated as male property or sexual objects of male desires. This is the devaluing of human life. Women are not property and they are not sexual objects. The devaluing of human life manifests itself throughout history in various ways. We must recognize to choose to measure human value, or this will have consequences. It must be our goal to see human life thrive if we want a future that values potential life. One of the arguments is we can't afford it. But this is blatantly just not true. As a country, we can afford trillions on wars to supposedly protect life and our way of life, but we can't afford to make sure children who have to go up for adoption can have safe homes and safe environments. We sometimes often don't recognize how the option of life saves more lives and creates more opportunity for these things like love and the things that you value. For instance, imagine Sir Nicholas Winston, I'm pronouncing his name correctly, had been aborted. He was responsible during World War II for saving 669 children from Nazi death camps. Had this man's mother given up and said life would be too hard or worried about a future she could not predict and gave that life up and had an abortion, this man would not have been born. Life brings opportunity. Life brings hope. Life brings joy. Nothing good is promised. You can only hope. I've known various people who I am so thankful that they are alive, because their parent had almost every justified reason for why they shouldn't bring that baby into the world. But they didn't let fear hold them back. And they got what I would call the blessings and love that comes from a child. And that's it.
Okay, well,
Right.
Thank you so very much, Skylar. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Shane's opening statement.
Okay. One thing I do want to say is that while I said in the email that arguments about medical necessity should be left out entirely, I don't know if entirely what is an accurate word, but I am going to steelman here and again recognize and note the fact that he makes an exception for medical necessity, because that's very important. So anyway, in discussions about morality or rights, whether they be philosophical or not, abortion is one of the biggest issues that can come up. This is an issue that guides many people's political ideas and even in many cases which belief system they subscribe to. The problem that many pro-choice secular people make is assume that all pro-lifers are religious. This obviously isn't true, and one can argue for or against the right to terminate pregnancy from either a theistic or atheistic worldview. It's out of the question which of these categories Skylar falls under, so I'm happy that a discussion about this can be held without religious language or arguments being involved. The way one side sees this is that fetuses or even embryos are human beings, and that as humanists, or just as other members of the human race, we ought to protect the right to life for all human beings, obviously including those who aren't born yet. This is an understandable position in itself, but it doesn't take all necessary variables of the issue into account, which is why I have to respond to it by saying that while we ought to protect the right to life for as many human beings as possible, we also need to restrict as few rights of others as possible in order to promote the best of all possible worlds. So to put it simply, I must admit that while I'm willing to talk about the biological arguments for and against the right to abortion, it feels dishonest to do so because the biological arguments really don't make up my position. Now, while I do hold that a fetus doesn't experience consciousness, pain, thought process, or any form of sentience, and can talk about why in the discussion, I need to make clear early on in this debate that even if Skylar were to somehow demonstrate that at 2 days after conception, embryos were alive, sentient, felt pain, and could write opening statements to debates about abortion, my position would remain unchanged. This is because my reason for being pro-choice ultimately boils down to the argument for bodily autonomy. The argument's quite simple, really, as rights should only be restricted for justified reasons, leaving the burden of justification on the person who wants to restrict a right rather than the person who does not want to restrict a right. And bodily autonomy is a fundamentally important right. So it's fundamentally important that a very heavy burden is met by the pro-life side in order to say that restricting this right is justified. I briefly talked to Skylar in advance and we agreed to debate on abortion. He made it clear to me that he doesn't have a problem with abortions done out of medical necessity, which is a distinction between him and many pro-lifers that leaves us with the possibility of being friends after the debate's over. But with this distinction noted for the sake of steelmanning Skylar, this raises yet another issue with his position. What exactly counts as a medically necessary abortion? I know some people may consider a fetus having Down syndrome to be a valid reason for terminating a pregnancy, but try using that argument in front of a pro-life parent of a Down syndrome kid and let me know what you learned from the discussion if you're someone who makes that argument. To be clear, I'm not implying that that's a reason Skylar would consider valid, as I haven't asked him and don't have any reason to think that that's where he draws the line, so to speak. My point is that if you find 10 pro-lifers who held this exact position of finding abortion to be justified, but only in the case of medical necessity, I would be rather surprised if you could find me 3 of them who all drew the line in the same place. Some people are much happier taking care of a kid who's both physically and mentally disabled than they are with making the decision to terminate a pregnancy. Some people are themselves disabled and only feel confident in adequately parenting a child who isn't disabled as well. Some people may feel like it isn't fair to force a severely disabled person into the world and be early enough in pregnancy to know the fetus doesn't have any pain receptors or brain activity at that point. There are a lot of issues with this position that can be revisited in the open discussion, but for now I want to get back to bodily autonomy. If a person who has already been born is ever in such a condition that they require an organ from another person, saving them by donating an organ is admirable. However, forcing another person to donate one of their organs without their consent would be immoral and disturbing. And frankly, Pro-choice people like myself view these scenarios as akin in the conceptual point. If someone does not consent to having their body used to help another person, then forcing them to use their body for another person's benefit is immoral. I shouldn't be forced to donate a kidney without my consent, and a pregnant woman shouldn't be forced to have her uterus used for development without her consent. If we advocate for a right for mere embryos to use another person's body without their consent, we aren't granting equal rights to the unborn. We're granting embryos a right that born human beings don't even have. Thank you.
Woo-hoo. Well, thank you so very much, Shane, for your opening statement. And now, in about a second, let's jump into that open conversation. Woo-hoo. And okay, guys, 20 minutes of open discussion. The floor is all yours.
Okay, so Skylar, I guess I wanted to begin by well, I did this in my opening statement, but I acknowledge the nuance. So I'm glad to hear that we would agree that when it comes to medical necessity, a woman should be allowed this right. I guess part of my problem with this, though, is like, what exactly would count as medically necessary abortion for you? Like, where do you draw the line at this is necessary or not?
Yeah, I would just leave that up to the doctor and her. And I would say stuff that literally, most of the time when we talk about medically necessary abortions, it tends to be either it's threatening the life of the mother, or the baby is just not viable. It's not really living. It's completely brain damaged or something like that. That's the situations where I would consider it a medical condition.
Okay, so mostly when it's just like fatal risk to the mother?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
Or the baby's unviable. It's not the baby, the fetus is unviable. Absolutely. Okay. That's why I thought it was more important to focus on just non-medical abortion.
Right. I agree on that. Though.
It does devalue life when we make excuses for why we have abortions. Yeah.
Right. So would a severe minimal risk count as like sufficient to you? So let's say what it was a risk of was severe, but we were early enough in the stage of a pregnancy.
Like I said, I'm happy to leave it up to the doctors. I'm not really here to quiver over the medical differences and what's going on. I'd leave it up to the doctors, and if they think it's medically necessary that the woman have the abortion, I think that's fine.
Okay.
But I think that this doesn't really deal with the heart of like what the abortion issue is. So right, because it's about what women sometimes are afraid will happen if they have the baby, which they don't feel supported. They don't feel like they have all the things they need possibly. There's lots of reasons why women have abortions, and most of those problems are solvable. We could fix those problems if we wanted to as a community.
Right. Well, so when you talk about like us being able to afford it, I think that one thing that needs to be taken into account is that the cost of, let's say, banning abortion and having every pregnancy carried out, the cost isn't deduced to its monetary cost. You know, there are a lot of problems that come with overpopulation. This is one of the things that we notice in countries, particularly that, countries where women don't have legal access to abortion. There are overpopulation problems that make the country worse for the people that are born living as a whole.
Is this a first world country you can give me an example
of? You know what? I don't have examples and data on which countries have been.
So what I would say is, as a first world country, we could certainly afford it. We're gonna drop over $1 trillion in stimulus this year, more than that probably in continued futures. We're gonna spend over $1 trillion on military. To say that we can't create functioning orphanages, or literally just kind of loosen up some of the restrictions, because there's all types of LGBTQ people who are literally being restricted and being passed over to adopt babies right now, that they are happy to raise children and take care of these children.
Right. So I wouldn't confidently and strongly disagree with this point of being able to afford it monetarily. I think that some of the arguments you're making are, they're good points. Like, we have trillions of dollars for the stimulus. Like, if you look at what we spend on war a year, like if we cut our war by, funding by like 1%, the things that we would fund would honestly be amazing. Absolutely. But when I start talking about there being cost that is more than monetary, one of the things I'm talking about is there being enough people who run orphanages, and that comes down to more than just cost. That comes down to having enough people do this.
I mean, why would we have a lack of people to do this if there's job opportunities and it could be economically, you could economically be responsible for it. You get money for it. We could pay people like a career, just like we pay educators.
Well, we pay
that
people to come
professional
up
care.
with,
Yeah.
you know, medicines and vaccines.
Sure.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that like there isn't an issue with getting medicine or vaccines in time. Like that we still have, you know, we have the funding is there, but the funding being there doesn't always mean that there's enough, right?
Well, if you set up the situation correct in the first place, or you start working towards it, obviously you're not going to eliminate abortion instantly. Like this is going to be a process that would take years. But like this idea that we just give up and just say keep having abortions going instead of just funding it, figuring out a solution to it. We could put men on the moon, we can split atoms, but we can't figure out how to take care of children. Think about how oftentimes when we have religious debates and we hold God accountable, right, for saying, hey, why aren't you taking care of these children? Why aren't you doing this? We have the means. It's what we choose as a society to value, and we do not value human life right now. In various ways I've already kind of shown you.
Right. So on the value of human life. So one thing that I wanted to kind of bring up, and you know what, it would have been in these notes. I took too many notes. I confused myself, and that's my own fault.
Oh, you're all good, man.
So anyway, you said that like everyone is here because their mother chose life, and you feel for that reason, that's part of the reason why you feel like this is devaluing life, is somebody is choosing not to value an embryo the same way that they value a born person. And I would grant that. I would grant that my value of like personhood doesn't extend to an embryo the way that it extends to you. Is that
it's a
like
completely
part of
subjective
why?
position, though, right? That would be a completely subjective position. Why you feel like one point of a pregnancy is more valuable than another point?
Yeah,
right?
Value in itself is subjective. So yeah, that's
I agree.
subjective. But
Perfect.
there
Right.
is an objective criteria for what establishes personhood. And so what I feel is that whether it's a human being, sure, we can call it a human being, but whether it's personhood and its rights are equal with yours or mine is one of the points of contention. Like, at what point does a clump of cells begin to have the same amount of rights as the pregnant woman carrying it? Like, at what stage do you have?
When you don't value life, it's up until late stages, right? This is what I'm talking about. It's what you choose to value. If you don't put value in every stage of life in that fetus that is healthy, right? You're devaluing. You're saying that it is not the same as a human being that's alive. And I'd ask you why? Why is it not the same?
Well, because they're not equivalent. It doesn't. So the things
why
that
are they not
make
equivalent to your values? What I'm asking.
right, because the things that make up personhood don't exist within it, such as like sentience, you know, morality, things like this.
Sure. So mentally challenged people don't have value to you?
If mentally challenged people have all kinds of value.
Exactly. Of course they do, right? So
every born human being has values.
Yeah, but they're the same things. It's the same attributes. If you're saying because someone isn't intelligent or doesn't have ability to think, right? Or not ability.
Well, no, but a born person, you know, being disabled, that doesn't mean they're not thinking, like, period. It just means that they have a disability, a limitation on their ability to think.
Sure, right.
Right. And I'm autistic. I would fit in this category. So
you wouldn't want someone to abort you because you were autistic, right?
Interesting question that I wanted to touch on. So
would you
say
want
that
it to be aborted, though? Before you go to answer that question for me, would you have preferred to be aborted?
I would prefer to not be aborted. So I will give that answer. I will add that I am very happy that my mom did have an abortion, and I know that might sound very contrary to me, being alive and saying this, but part of the reason people get abortions is for the sake of family planning. So my mom got pregnant before she was pregnant with me, and she was not in a place where she was actually capable of taking care of a kid. So she terminated that pregnancy. Now, one reason this comes into account my life is because my mom didn't want to have more kids after having two. So she had her tubes tied, and she now can't get pregnant. But if she would have done that with the first child, had her tubes tied, well, I wouldn't be here today. So you are talking to someone who's alive as a result of abortion being legal. And in respect to legal, safe abortions, one point that I needed to touch on is
I would have
if
addressed
you,
what you said there, because
okay,
a
yeah,
lot of stuff you built into it.
I
Right?
did. You're right.
You don't know if you would be alive if your mother had had that first kid, right? And I don't want to take it in the realm of personal stuff because this is a debate. So let me just take it in another realm. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's take it in the realm of another woman who, for whatever reasons, but it doesn't. That's what I'm saying. If you put these reasons that are economical, or you're worried about the future over life, that's the problem. You're devaluing life and valuing the worry of what could happen, or the economic future, because you're insisting, in a sense, that you know what will happen. We don't know what will happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen, right? And that's the point. And to say that, hey, some kid could, like, why couldn't she give, not you, right? Why couldn't a mother give the baby for adoption? Somewhere where the life would still have value and it would no longer not exist in there. It's just that when you have options of adoption and things like that, it doesn't seem like a reasonable decision to say, well, I'd rather terminate the possible life that could have so many good things come into the world, so many good outcomes, could save children from a Holocaust type scenario like I outlined.
Right.
I don't understand why you wouldn't choose the way that your child has life and opportunity.
Right. So on the point of like, if a good person was who had been born was aborted, they wouldn't have done that good thing. I mean, obviously, this would apply to bad people the same way. Like you would probably agree with me that, like, it would have been a good thing if Hitler had been aborted, but this isn't really, you know.
No, I still wouldn't think it was a good thing. I would say that I would hope that something would have changed, but
something would have changed. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
I wish something would have changed, but I would never say abortion is going to be a good thing in that context.
So the problem with the devalue of life, because as somebody who personally, like I admit earlier, I value embryos less than I value born people. What do you think about the argument from Bodily Autonomy, where part of the point that I'm making is that if I'm a born human being and I need a kidney to survive, and you are compatible and your kidneys could save me, I mean, sure, it would be an admirable moral action, we could call it, for you to donate a kidney to me. But do you think that you should be legally required to donate a kidney to me? Like, do I have a right to use your body to save mine without your consent?
No, I think in that situation is like the Charlie car problems, right? Where you throw all these scenarios out and we figure out which one would be more like could kill two people or one person. But I think the problem with this is, like, abortion is not the same thing, right? Abortion is, we have two lives, right? And listen, in the end, I'll be honest with you. This, like you kind of agreed to it earlier, this is just a subjective debate, whether I value the life of the fetus more than I value the autonomy of the woman. Right. And in your situation, you value the autonomy more than you value the life of the fetus.
Correct.
Right. But I think in the end, I'm always going to side with the life aspect. I value life because of the good that life can bring and the value that I believe life has. I don't believe there's a price tag on life. And I think that when we have abortions for economic reasons, in those sense, I think that we're putting a price tag on the future and a life that you can possibly never know.
Okay, but if we were to simply get rid of abortion, then that making the world a worse place, you could say that it devalues the lives of those people after they're born, because if we have population issues, like overpopulation is simply an issue in the world, we wouldn't really be able to justify selecting groups of born people to kill for the sake of population control. But if we can prevent people who are not sentient beings from becoming sentient beings simply because of the case that, you know, their parents aren't ready to become parent. That was a weird way to put that. Simply because the hosts aren't ready to become parents. I think that we're failing to take into account that if we're taking the well-being of the fetus into consideration, we also have to take into consideration the well-being of it after it's born. And if it's born into this overpopulated world, then that doesn't suit its well-being very, very good.
Yeah, I don't agree with you now. Like, certain countries are overpopulated, but American growth is not overpopulated. In fact, I believe we have a deficit in growth in the sense of like a rate of how fast we're growing. Most first world countries have deficits, like, you know, like Japan is another example. They don't have as many children. I don't think it's going to hurt in that sense, but I mean, this is just, like I said, this is just arguing. We don't know if there was only, I believe, 500,000 abortions in 2018. Like it's not going to cause problems, right?
Right.
In fact, it'll probably actually help our economy in a lot of ways, because right now the boomers, we're paying all this out and Social Security, all these things. We need more people in this country. But like I said, the main thing for me is life has potential and value. And because you're worried about the future or worried about something happening or feel insecure, ending that life that could be your savior one day, right? That kid could get them
Okay.
having to donate an organ to you. That kid might save 20, 30 people, right? Thank God Dolly Parton wasn't aborted, because look, we wouldn't have a vaccine, all the funding she did. So I just find it like bodily autonomy. I'm sorry, I don't, it's so hard for me to say this, because I know shit, the women are treated so awful. Like, men are awful human beings to women, and what they've done to women throughout history is disgusting. Makes me vomit when I even think about it. Like, and I hate that in this one issue I have to be like, oh, look at me, a man, saying that, overriding the bodily autonomy of a woman. But I just value that life too much in the end, and the potential of it. Sorry, I went on a little long.
Sure. So if I could demonstrate with a study, and if, you know what, it's my own fault that I didn't bring any up specifically, but if I could demonstrate to you with a study that banning abortion, access to safe legal abortion, didn't cause any significant decrease in abortions, but rather led to an increase in unsafe illegal abortions that had, you know, more harmful side effects.
Oh, I know that's happened before. That's happened in different countries.
So
but it depends on the system you have to get you there.
My question though is, like, if you were to see for a fact that banning abortion doesn't actually make there be less abortion, it just changes the means about women do it, which leads to more pregnant women dying, would you then support a right to safe legal abortion? And again, you could dislike it, but it seems like even in your view, it would still be preferable to these unsafe illegal methods, right?
No, what I would say is, you don't do immoral things, what I would consider immoral, like the wrong thing, in order to make a right. I don't think it's ever going to be right in that situation. I get what you're saying with the idea of it, but also this is just like, there's no evidence of this. Like, this is just all hypothetical, right? I would have to really reconsider your position if the thing was real and it was actually happening. But I don't think that would change my mind, because I think in the end you still eliminate life. And you know, the people, it's like, you know, I want to eliminate like crack cocaine use, right? But in the end, I don't want crack cocaine addicts to go to jail. I would never put women in a position where they would go to jail for an abortion or anything like that. But it's more complicated. But if you get into theory and how the system would work, I mean, it's complex. Nobody knows how it would work in the end.
Okay, so while you're pro-life, you don't think that women should be given a death penalty for abortion?
No, I wouldn't charge them. What I would do is charge the doctors who commit the abortions.
Okay, but you would think that the doctor committing the abortion should be charged with murder?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if it was illegal, yeah, if you had abortion that was illegal and they were literally doing something that was illegal, they should be charged with it. If it was illegal,
so why not the mother if she's consenting to the abortion?
Mm-hmm. She's not the one physically doing the abortion.
Right, but if I ordered a hit on you,
let me rephrase it this way.
Okay.
The reason why I would arrest the doctor is, if you arrest the doctor, you lose doctors that are committing them, actually performing the abortion on all the women, right? If you arrest the women, it doesn't stop anything. You're just punishing women and throwing her in prison for it. But if you stop the doctor, you're stopping the person who's committing the abortions.
Well, I'm not so sure what the benefits would be of jailing that many doctors. I would have to say that
jail them. Maybe I would just, you know, take away their license. Probably more likely.
Well, wouldn't you agree with me that, like, if I had a hit ordered on you and someone else were to kill you, that it shouldn't just be the person who kills you?
I'm not taking away moral culpability from the woman here.
Okay, but it's just that
I'm not going to throw her in prison.
This isn't the point that I'm trying to get at here.
I don't think you understand what I'm saying.
If you value born human life equally as you value an embryo, then it seems like if a person orders a hit on you, the person needing to be jailed for that would be akin to the mother needing to be jailed for consenting to that abortion. If these are equal.
I understood what you said. Well, like I said, it's a pragmatic situation. I'm doing something out of the pragmatism to see what's going to lower the number of abortions, right? And arresting the women, first of all, and then we have to pay for that. We're going to put that woman in prison. I'm not a big fan of prison at all, so that opens up a whole new, can of worms. I'm more libertarian on that aspect.
Mhm.
But this idea that, Liz, I'm not saying morally culpable. Yeah, sure, she's morally responsible too. But I'm talking pragmatically to stop the abortions from happening. I would go after the doctors by taking away their licenses, so they couldn't practice, they couldn't do anything like that. I think it would be useless to throw women in prison.
Okay. Well, I think that saying it would be useless to throw women in prison for consenting to the abortion is akin to saying that it would be useless to throw me in prison for ordering a hit on you. And
Not the
I
same
understand that we disagree on whether these are akin. I guess my point is, I understand that you're talking about focusing on what would minimize abortion. And, I'm not necessarily advocating for this position of like everyone get an abortion. I'm pro-choice. But with respect to simply charging someone for ordering a hit, moving away from simply minimizing abortion, why would those not be akin, me ordering a hit and a woman consenting to abortion? Like, what makes them separate?
Because what I'm talking about in jail sense is I'm using prison and laws as a tool to lower abortions. I'm not talking about in a moral sense. Yes, I'd say in the moral sense they're saying, but it's useless to throw the woman in prison. It's not going to prevent anything. It's not going to. Abortion already happened. So,
but she can get another abortion. She's shown that she's a woman.
If she can't find a doctor to actually do it, it's going to be much tougher. There's no perfect solution to this. So I'm just giving ideas.
I agree. There's no perfect solution.
Woohoo! Thank you guys so very much. And now we're going to be going in reverse order since Skylar started. Shane, you're going to be going first for closing statements. The 5 minutes are all yours.
Okay, well, I guess in closing, I would like to say that, as I said at the beginning of the debate, the distinction between his pro-life position and many pro-life positions does leave me thinking that we're able to leave this debate as friends. This has certainly been the most respectful debate that I've ever had on this subject matter. I feel like my issue at the very end, as far as not just moral accountability, but why it would not make sense to throw a woman in prison for consenting to an abortion, if it would make sense to throw me in prison for ordering a hit. If these things are akin, why they shouldn't both be thrown in prison for it doesn't make sense to me. Because if you're saying, well, if she can't find a doctor, she can't do it again. But we know that this is a woman who's willing to get abortions. She's done it before. We know that restricting access to safe legal abortions shows an increase in unsafe abortions that can lead to the death of not only obviously the embryo or fetus in question, but the parent, or I wouldn't say parent, but the carrier as well. So I don't think that was fully, I guess a distinction was really made in why you would jail one but not the other. There will be, I guess, hopefully he could address that a little bit more in his closing. I would say that I'm left with the bodily autonomy argument. And if you do want to argue that an embryo or fetus should have equal rights with born human beings, then you would have to argue that they only have equal rights, not more. And you would say that since born human beings lack the right to use another person's body to benefit their own health, that should apply to an embryo or fetus as well. Sex is not consent to pregnancy the same way drinking is not consent to liver failure. So I don't think that you could blame somebody for becoming pregnant and deciding that, okay, this pregnancy is not in my best interest. And since it is not in my best interest, I am going to terminate it early. I don't consent to use my own body. I don't see there being anything morally wrong with that. And I do think if somebody could show me that there was some example of abortion being immoral, I might be willing to concede that point. Though I have a hard time bringing myself to think what exactly would count as an immoral abortion. And I can't really come up with the scenario, since I'm respecting a person's right to not use their body to save someone else in every circumstance. With that said, thank you very much, Skylar. It's been an awesome debate.
Woohoo! Thank you so very much, Shane. And now we're going to hand it over to Skylar for his closing 5 minutes.
Awesome. Yeah, this has been a fantastic debate. Really enjoyed it. Very engaging and honest. I would say that honestly, the legal, like to get into the legal details of how we punish somebody or the criminality of how long someone goes to jail or if they go to jail, those can be worked out, right? But what I'm really arguing for is whether abortion should be, if we should be pro-abortion or we should be more pro-life. I'm arguing the pro-life position. I'm showing that life is valuable, right? I mean, whenever we dehumanize somebody, it never goes well. And this is what I hear when we talk about fetuses. We dehumanize fetuses as if they have no value, right? Like my opponent just said he could not see, make sure I understood, maybe I misunderstood, but he could not see a moral reason why it would ever be immoral to have an abortion, right? I struggle with it because I don't understand how someone could say it would be moral in all cases to take life like that, right? I understand a medical situation where the baby's going to die, the mother's going to die. Like I get that. But if simply the mother could give the baby up for adoption, but she literally, through the choice of bodily autonomy, says, "Hey, it's my body. I want to take the life of the baby instead of giving it to somebody else who could raise it." I don't know how we find that moral or just. If this baby was out of the womb, this wouldn't even be a conversation, right? It would be instantly, you would recognize it. I think about, I had actually going to bring this up earlier, when you think about, what was it, Thomas Swift's modest proposal, right? And how he talks about how the Irish should basically, sell their babies to the rich to eat, so they get out of poverty, right? It's such a ridiculous idea, right? The idea you would sell babies and eat them, to get out of poverty. And I think somehow that we've gotten on this idea, and it's equally ridiculous. This idea that we feel like we can solve our problems by taking the lives of innocent ones, right? Healthy, innocent ones for no way we could read the future could live fantastic lives, could change the world, could make this world a better place. Yet because of the fear we have of the future, we choose to take an easier path, right? If you talk to any family, including my family, who's ever lost a child through miscarriage, we don't treat as we lost like a sack of cells or just this thing, right? This life had a name that we had given it. This life had a future that we imagined in our heads. Had there been a way I could have saved that life, I would have done it, right? It's a scary, scary world we live in, right? I get it. And women, oh, the piece of crap men are sometimes. They run out on you, right? They leave you alone. They want to stick, they want to have sex with you and they just want to walk away, right? And that's not fair. What else do I want to say? I want to say that we were talking about levels, right? Like about we're talking about medical levels, like some people would consider Down syndrome like a reason to abort your children. Ironically, you can see videos of people with Down syndrome begging people not to abort people with Down syndrome. Right. Why does the person with Down syndrome not deserve a life? A life with potential of happiness, love. Why does the person who gets to choose for non-medical reasons an abortion get to choose the life that baby's not going to have? We've got to do better at valuing human life in this world. When we don't value humans, we get people fighting in coliseums. We get executions in the street. We see the most cruelty of humanity. All human life has value. Let's not make excuses for why we should take it away. Thank you for listening. Come check out the Skylar Fiction Show.
Woohoo! All right. Thank you so much, Skylar, for your closing statements. And now we're going to roll into the judges round.
Oh, that guy looked like he got hurt. And I was ask you, Jay, did you get a couple black eyes before we started tonight? Got the sunglasses on?
Yeah, no.
All right.
Okay. Just make sure. I didn't know if the old atheist pastor was beating you up over there.
No. Actually, he's been taking some much needed time off. So
Oh,
they
good.
kind of left to my own devices. So.
Oh, even more dangerous. Great. All right. So, Skylar, Shane, thank you. That I agree with both of you. That's probably one of, if not the calmest debate I've ever watched and heard on that topic. So, congratulations to you two. I mad respect for that.
Leave it to the secularists to have a rational debate.
You don't say. You don't say. So, real quick, I haven't got to do this so far today because I've been super, super busy getting everything behind the scenes done. But I do want to shout out really fast our sponsors that made the cash prize and everything. They made it happen for us. So, Pasta Mike and Eddie from Brute Facts Podcast, Nate Game, Witter Shins, and I'll tell that story later with that contribution. It's pretty funny. I'll tell it later. We have a little more time. Skeptics of Middle Georgia, Don Fulman, and then our friend Jim Benton from Meeting Forge podcast. Go check them out. But no, thank you guys very, very much. And let's go to this format here. Tobin, what say you?
Wow, it's a really hard choice. It really is. I really liked how Skylar was associating, the value to life, and Shane was very organized with his thoughts, though, and Shane still kept me. I think Shane should have it.
Okay. And if I can ask on that one on your scorecard, what was it? I asked this with one of the other ones. What was it on your scorecard that convinced you? Just so I know.
What convinced me is there was not a consistency with the argument that I think Skylar was trying to make with trying to punish the doctors and other people. That was one thing that stuck out with me.